What the Study Says.
Welcome back to What the Study Says. I'm Dr. Kai.
And I'm Dr. May.
Today we are walking straight into the fire. We are tackling a topic that is simultaneously the punchline of a million bad jokes, the root of serious anxiety for half the population, and, until recently, a massive blind spot in evolutionary biology.
We are asking, does size matter?
Exactly.
And before you roll your eyes or worry that we pivoted to, late-night cable TV advice, let me stop you. We are not looking at a magazine quiz.
No.
We aren't analyzing a thread on Reddit. We are dissecting a landmark study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
Which, for anyone who doesn't spend their Friday nights refreshing academic databases, is PNAS. This is one of the big three journals globally.
Mm-hmm.
If research makes it in here, it has survived a gauntlet of peer review. It's the Ivy League of scientific publishing.
Precisely. We're looking at a paper from 2013 by Motz, Wong, Peters, and Jenians. The title is Penis Size Interacts with Body Shape and Height to Influence Male Attractiveness.
Quite a title.
It is. And honestly, this paper is a masterclass in how to take a taboo subject and apply rigorous mathematical science to it.
It really is. And it starts with a genuine evolutionary puzzle. If you look at the animal kingdom, humans are weird.
We are.
Specifically, human males are outliers. Compared to our closest primate cousins, chimps, gorillas' human males have conspicuously large, non-retractable genitalia.
It's a striking difference. I mean, take a male gorilla. A silverback is a massive, dominant creature weighing up to 400 pounds.
Huge!
Yet, their erect penis size is roughly 3 centimeters. Chimpanzees are slightly larger, but still much, much smaller than humans.
So from an evolutionary standpoint, nature doesn't usually waste energy growing extra tissue unless there's a very good reason.
Right. So the question isn't just, do women like it? The real question is, why did we evolve this way? Did female choice drive this evolution over hundreds of thousands of years?
That's the hypothesis. But testing it has historically been a nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. Think about how this data was collected in the past. You hand someone a clipboard and ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is size to you?
And you run headfirst into what we call social desirability bias.
Right. The polite factor. A woman might think, well, I shouldn't be superficial, so she circles not important, even if her subconscious reaction is totally different.
Or they'd show them line drawings, just 2D sketches on a piece of paper.
Which is terrible for judging volume. A line drawing on a flat page just doesn't tell you anything about mass or mechanics.
So these researchers at the Australian National University realized that if they wanted real answers, they needed to stop asking questions.
And start measuring physiological reactions to realistic stimuli.
So they went high-tech. They recruited 105 heterosexual Australian women, average age around 26.
But instead of surveys, they use a software suite called Make Human. And with it, they generated life-size, photorealistic 3D computer models of male figures.
And this is the critical part. They didn't just show a picture. They projected these figures onto a wall at a 1-to-1 scale.
Yeah. So the participant is standing in the room with what looks like a digital human that is, say, 6 feet tall.
And to solve the depth perception issue, the figures actually rotated.
They turned 30 degrees to the side. And this allowed the women to see the depth of the chest, the hips, and, yes, the genitalia in a 3-dimensional space.
It removes all the ambiguity. You aren't guessing, you're seeing.
Let's talk about the variables they tweaked, because they created a whole matrix of different body types. They manipulated 3 things independently.
Right. There was height, body shape, and, of course, flaccid penis size.
Height ranged from roughly 5'4" to 6'1", a pretty standard distribution.
Mm-hmm.
Then they manipulated body shape, specifically the shoulder to hip ratio. And this went from a pear shape, so narrow shoulders, wider hips, all the way to a broad-shouldered, V-tapered inverted triangle.
And then the variable of the hour. They varied flaccid size from 5 centimeters to 13 centimeters.
And we should clarify for the listeners, because this is a scientific study, they used flaccid measurements for a reason.
Right. It's because that is the state in which prehistoric females would have most often observed males before choosing a mate.
That's a key point. In a pre-clothing society, the flaccid state is the advertisement. So the women viewed these figures anonymously and just rated them on sexual attractiveness. No interviews, no explain your answer.
Just a visceral gut check rating from 1 to 7.
So let's get into the findings.
Okay.
Because I think if you stopped someone on the street and asked, what did the study say was the most important physical trait, they'd probably guess height or size.
And they would be wrong.
Completely wrong. The absolute heavyweight champion of the study, the variable that just crushed everything else, was the shoulder-to-hip ratio.
The V-taper.
The V-taper. This one aspect of body shape accounted for nearly 79.6% of the variation in attractiveness scores. It wasn't even close.
That is staggering. I mean, nearly 80% of the decision comes down to the torso.
It makes perfect biological sense. Broad shoulders and a narrow waist are like a billboard for testosterone and upper body strength.
A signal for health.
In an ancestral environment, that signals hunting ability, fighting ability, genetic health. If a figure in the study had narrow shoulders and wide hips, they were rated poorly almost regardless of how tall or well-endowed they were.
So practically speaking, before any guys listening start worrying about things they can't change, the data says, go do some pull-ups.
Exactly. Shoulders are the main event.
But once we control for that massive factor, we do have to answer the title question. Did size matter?
It did. There was a significant positive effect. So figures with larger sizes were rated as more attractive. But, and I love this comparison, the study found that penis size and height were statistically equivalent in their impact.
Equivalent?
They each accounted for about 5 to 6% of the remaining variance.
That is actually kind of profound.
Yeah.
Think about the dating market today.
Yeah.
People are very open about height requirements. You see 6 foot plus on profiles everywhere. It's a socially acceptable metric of value. But nobody puts must be X centimeters on their bio without getting, banned.
Yet, biologically, this study suggests they're like different denominations of the same currency. In that split-second visual assessment, gaining a few inches of height buys you the exact same amount of attraction points as an increase in size.
They're interchangeable assets in the eyes of the rater.
But here is where we have to be careful with the bigger is better narrative.
Right.
Because the data didn't show a straight line up to infinity, did it? It showed a curve.
It showed what's called quadratic selection.
Which sounds terrifyingly complex, but let's use an analogy.
Okay.
Think of it like a salary. The difference between making $10,000 a year and $50,000 a year is massive. It changes your life.
You feel every single dollar of that increase.
Right. That's the lower end of the curve in this study. Moving from small to average yields a huge spike in attractiveness.
But then you have the billionaire bracket.
Exactly. The difference between making $10 million and $10.1 million, you barely notice it. The curve flattens out.
The returns diminish.
That's what the study found. As size increased past the average, you still get a bonus, but it's smaller and smaller.
So it's not that bigger is always better. It's more that too small is a penalty, and big is a bonus that eventually plateaus.
That's a fair summary. Technically, they didn't find a peak where it became unattractive. The curve didn't go back down, but the slope became very gentle at the high end.
Okay, now, we need to talk about the most sophisticated part of this analysis. Because up until now, we've been talking about these body parts like they're just floating in space.
Yes.
But the study looked at the interaction effects. How does one trait change the perception of another?
This is where the paper gets brilliant. They found correlational selection. Essentially, the attractiveness of the penis size depended entirely on how tall the man was.
This was the finding that I found pretty brutal. Let's break down the height by size interaction.
So for the taller men, the figures at the 6'1" end of the spectrum, a larger penis had a massive multiplier effect on their attractiveness score. It was like a super bonus.
But for the shorter figures?
It was a flat line. For figures in the 5'4" range, having a larger penis did not significantly boost their attractiveness score.
Ouch. That's rough. So you're saying if you're on the shorter side, the bonus of being well-endowed basically evaporates. The jury doesn't even see it.
It seems the penalty for short stature is so overwhelming in the visual processing that the positive trait of size just can't break through. It gets washed out.
And why do we think that happens? Is it just a bias or is there a visual component?
Well, there's a strong argument for the size contrast effect. Imagine a large shelving unit, that's the tall man. If you put a small object on it, the object looks tiny by comparison.
So a tall man needs a larger size just to maintain visual proportionality.
Whereas on a smaller frame, a moderate size might look substantial enough, but more likely, the rater simply discounts the short figure so quickly that they don't even bother assessing the finer details.
It's a harsh reality of biological selection. And we saw a similar thing with body shape, right?
Yes. A masculine, V-tapered torso magnified the bonus of size. If the figure was pear-shaped, size didn't help them much.
So the traits need to work in concert.
Exactly. A perfect score in one area doesn't fix a low score in another. It's a package deal.
I want to circle back to how we know the women weren't just clicking randomly.
Right.
Because one of the critiques of these studies is always, well, maybe they just looked at the face and clicked. But the researchers tracked their eyes, or their attention.
The gaze analysis. This is fascinating psychology. They measured the response latency, how long the women looked at the figure before rating it.
And what caught their eye?
Women looked significantly longer at figures that were tall, broad-shouldered, and had larger penises.
So it wasn't a polite glance. They were captivated.
It aligns with what we know about attention. Humans and animals stare longer at stimuli they find rewarding or attractive. It confirms that the high ratings weren't a fluke. That specific combination of traits physically held their visual attention longer.
It's also interesting to think about who is doing the choosing here. We've talked about the men, but did the demographics of the 105 women change anything?
Surprisingly, no. The preferences were remarkably consistent across age and even contraceptive use, but there were two correlations that stuck out.
Okay.
First, taller women preferred taller men.
Assortative mating, attracts, makes sense.
Exactly. But the second one was that heavier women, those with a higher BMI, showed a stronger preference for larger penis size.
Is there a biological reason for that, or is it just mechanics?
The study suggests it could be mechanics, or it could be a general preference for robustness. So if a woman has a larger body type, she may subconsciously seek a mate who matches that scale in all dimensions.
So we have all this data. We know shoulders are king. We know size is currency. And we know height acts as a gatekeeper. But we promised to answer the why. Why did we evolve this way?
This brings us back to the theory of precopulatory sexual selection.
Which is a fancy way of saying the female chose the male before they had sex.
Correct. For a long time, scientists thought human genitals evolved for sperm competition. The idea was that maybe the shape was designed to displace the sperm of rival males.
Right.
But if that were the case, we'd expect huge testicles like chimps have, because volume is what matters in sperm wars. Humans have relatively moderate testicles, but large penises.
So the design isn't about the plumbing, it's about the billboard.
It's about the visual. This study provides hard evidence that females have a visual bias for this trait. Now imagine early humans on the savannah. No clothes.
Everything is on display.
Exactly. In that environment, the penis is a conspicuous signal. If females had even a slight preference for a larger size, maybe equating it with health or general vigor, then males with those genes would get chosen more often.
And over thousands and thousands of generations, that slight preference pushes the entire species away from the gorilla baseline and toward where we are now.
It's the same evolutionary force that gave the peacock its tail or the lion its mane. It's not necessarily about survival utility.
It's about sensory appeal to the opposite sex.
It changes how you view history, doesn't it? We tend to think of evolution as this brutal survival of the fittest cage match. But a huge part of who we are today, our literal anatomy, is the result of millions of discerning looks from our female ancestors.
We are the product of their choices. Every man walking around today is the descendant of a long line of men who passed this visual inspection.
So what is the takeaway here? We've analyzed the study, but what does it mean for the guy listening to this on his commute?
I think there are two takeaways. One is validating and one is empowering.
Go on.
The validating part is, yes, size matters. It's not in your head. It's a real biological signal that has weight in attraction. It validates the insecurity in a way. It says you aren't crazy for thinking this is a factor.
Right. But the empowering takeaway is the context. It is one factor, and it is far from the most important one.
Not even close.
The shoulder-to-hip ratio was nearly 80% of the variance, and that is a trait that, unlike height, you can actually influence with lifestyle and fitness.
That's the aha moment for me. We obsess over the things we can't change, height, bone structure, size, but the data says the biggest lever you can pull is your overall fitness and body composition.
Exactly. And biologically, that makes sense. A gym-honed physique shows current health and discipline. Size just shows genetics. Attraction is a complex equation, and you have more variables in your control than you might think.
It's a symphony, not a solo. You can't just play one note and expect applause.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Well, this has been quite the journey through anatomy, psychology, and 3D projection mapping.
It certainly has. And for anyone who wants to dive deeper into the charts, and seeing that curve really does help visualize the diminishing returns, I highly recommend looking up the Matz et al. Paper in PNAS. It's a fascinating read.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the biology of attraction, and you want more science-backed breakdowns of the things that make us human, please subscribe to our channel, What the Study Says.
And share what the study says with a friend who loves a good fact check. Or maybe just send it to your gym buddy as motivation for shoulder day.
Thanks for listening.